The Daily Mail says that weeks before those 3 flying objects were shot down, the Pentagon warned that UFOs were an immediate threat to the safety of U.S. citizens.
This morning, U.S. intelligence agencies confirm hundreds of additional UAP sightings have been reported.
A Pentagon report is detailing a dramatic increase in UFO sightings.
UAP stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, otherwise known as UFOs.
And many of them are explained as being drones, birds, or weather events, but about half of them remain unexplained.
This morning, there's new information surrounding the Chinese spy balloon. U.S. officials tell ABC News the spy balloon, which was intended for surveillance.
NBC News is reporting that as soon as this afternoon, President Biden is planning to address the American people about the unidentified objects.
The administration is saying we don't yet know what these last 3 objects are, and we don't want to characterize until we recover them.
And the administration is on top of this and done a very, very good job.
But on the other hand, it wasn't a threat. Both of those things can't be true.
The annual report on unidentified aerial phenomena now reveals 366 new close encounters.
Oh my gosh, dude. Wow. Look at that, man.
And what this report found is that there have been more than 300 new sightings of what the government calls UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, or more commonly called UFOs.
What they mean when they're talking about UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena, as the kind of government speak for it, or UFOs as we know them.
Because if it is aliens, I want to get on the good side right away. Welcome to Earth. That we would like to just helpful tips.
I think one of the key points in this report
for determining how to deal with unidentified aerial objects.
Is it advanced U.S. technology? Is it advanced technology from a foreign adversary like perhaps China or Russia? Or is it extraterrestrial?
In doing so, they tracked 3 unidentified objects, one in Alaska, Canada, and over Lake Huron in the Midwest. At their recommendation, I gave the order to take down these 3 objects due to hazards to civilian commercial air traffic and because we could not rule out the surveillance risk of sensitive facilities.
Here we go, baby! Get
it! I just heard the boom!
And boom goes the dynamite.
We don't yet know exactly what these 3 objects were, but make no mistake. If any object presents a threat to the safety and security of the American people, I will take it down. And I hope we're going to get to the bottom of this. But I make no apologies for taking down that balloon. Thank you very much.
The office that tracks these sightings in restricted military airspace says that some people require
I don't know. We're in a tight spot. I think it's pretty clear the Greys are coming. They're almost certainly going to try to anal probe us all. We better get our guard up. Of course, I'm being facetious. What's going on in the world now, if people haven't noticed, is there's I don't know if it's the final push, but a big push for the world operators to do their big bid to get towards one world governance, one world currency, digital everything, so the digital and the AI can police what they don't have manpower for. And this is more of the same. They keep floating spy balloons and aliens. It's just one thing after the other. And what you've got to realize is if I was in control of the world and I had access to nothing more than how searches go online, I would have enough information to know which one of my agendas I should pursue. If you simply knew that the alien thing was getting massive traffic, well, that's the avenue you go. So I think what's going on here is they're floating a lot of ideas to see what sticks, and at the same time trying to keep people off balance, which is classic Tavistockian. Never let them, it's good, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. Okay, it's okay now. Maybe it'll get back to good, and then pull the rug again.
Now, have you taken any time recently filming this guy, or is most of your concentration on the podcast these days?
Well, this is what happened. I have an 11-inch scope, was the main scope I was using at the end there. It weighs about 75 pounds. It's not, you can't grab the tube when you move it. My wife weighs 100 pounds, and I actually had to get a hernia surgery. When I moved here to the East Coast, there's stairs to navigate. So it became just not so doable to, you know, I could get it out and I could do things, but then you're out there and it's the middle of the night and you got to put things away. Here's the exciting news. I saved for years and years, and I just got delivery of a huge solar telescope. My goal is going to be in this spring. It's nowhere near the weight of the other system. So my goal is to go after the sun like I did the moon. I think the sun is a much bigger deal, particularly with where we are in the eras and this kind of thing. And I'm going to see what I can pull off at a very high level.
And would you be planning on putting that stuff on YouTube, or would this all kind of maybe just go towards a sequel to Shoot the Moon?
In the short run, I'm not putting anything on any of the censoring platforms who, by the way, claim some control. And in some cases, they claim part ownership of things that get put on their platforms. Well, I might put a bumper saying that I've got this new stuff. It'll all run on Crow777radio.com. It's my work. I own that, and I'm not going to make the mistakes I did last time.
You've spoken before about you're not a flat earther, but you know they're lying about space. How do you conceptualize space?
We know so little about what's above our head that I have said, and I think I say it in Shoot the Moon, that the space agencies are a club. I don't care what flag they're waving. And they're all involved in the same agenda, which is to ensure we know very little, if anything, about what's above our head. I have gone on the record as saying things like, I think it is quite possible that space would be better described as a liquid. I have said that there is a hard, fast barrier, which most people would take if they were religiously oriented to be the firmament, which I agree with, or maybe if they're flat earthers, some kind of a dome idea, which sure, there's a corollary, it's a similar idea. And when we get to stars, the people that I respect are the people who were a long, long time ago. And part of the problem with that is that stuff's been translated. One of the main places that translated were the Jesuits and the Vatican and places like that. And what do we know about them? They lie. So we're back to the same problem. I know I've been lied to on a massive scale by where this information has come from. I'm not interested in being lied to again. When you get to something like Tycho Brahe, I do the best I can to get back to what is claimed to be a straightforward translation. Tycho Brahe spent his life, or most of it, observing. His work was so good, and it was right before telescopes were invented, that the people we got who lied to us, like Kepler and Copernicus, took his data. Well, certainly Kepler. Maybe even, there's rumors that maybe he had something to do with Tycho's death, but it's pretty commonly accepted that he got Tycho's data. I refer to him as Tycho Brahe's whipping boy, but Kepler's the man they hold up for us. In my view, that's about where the narrative change started to switch. But to get back to Tycho, currently, my best guess at what we call a solar system comes from Tycho Brahe. Now, later, people like Rudolf Steiner, the Rosicrucians, gave him a nod, saying this is the closest, or we agree. Maybe not fully on we agree, but then they produced drawings that are quite similar and maybe differ a little. So I think we're starting to be in the ballpark. But one of the things Tycho Brahe informed us is a similar thing that the Bible informs us. The earth stands fast. Now, if someone like Brahe was doing the best he could, which I'm sure he was doing the real observation, which Kepler nor Copernicus never did. Never were they observers. They did clever math, what we have now from people who do clever math. Tycho Brahe observed, and he did it without telescopes. He passed away right before we got them. Well, if it was true, and he is correct that the earth stands fast, and the Bible is correct that it can't be moved, or however they phrase it in the Bible, then aren't they really saying that where I am standing is not like this thing I'm looking at that's spinning, like, say, Jupiter or any of the so-called planets, which we can visibly see easily appearing to spin? What are they saying there? And so my main point here is I think we need to come back to common sense. I think we need to face up that we've been lied to on scales that are unimaginable. People like Brahe and others used to have ideas of maybe there's crystalline spheres, not necessarily Brahe. Maybe there's, all these ideas of how could these wandering stars, as they called them, the planets as we call them, how could this work? But you'll see up later into the secret societies, they're assigning realms of influence, a spiritual hierarchy to what we would call an orbital area, like the distance between, say, the sun and Mars. That would become, in their view, a spiritual hierarchy. And I think there's veracity to these ideas, but I also think that they don't give away they don't give away the cash register to the customer. I think we're getting glimpses and views and hints at what's been held by people. But what I was about to say is there's an idea that, well, here's where this wandering star or planet is, and then beyond that is this. Then, so it would go, from our point of view, it would go something like this. Where we're standing, what we call Earth, up to the moon, then the distance to Venus, then the distance to Mercury, then the distance to the powers of the sun, as it was once referred to. Beyond that, there would be a distance and a spiritual hierarchy referred to as the mites of Mars, taking that, what we call an orbit, or what NASA wants us to think of as an orbit. Beyond that, the distance between Mars and Jupiter would be known in some secret societies as the dominions of Jupiter. Beyond that would be very ancient things. And Saturn has always had the ancient idea, partially because it's apparently so far away or moves so slowly. It became Chronos and Father Time and all these things that indicate it's old. That would be the thrones of Saturn. Now, in some of the breakdowns from the very old schools of thought, there would be a star field beyond that. And in that idea, it's not that this star I'm looking at and this one right next to it is 500 gazillion light years beyond. There's actually like a field of stars, however that would work out. Of course, in some of the spiritual traditions, you'll get things like the cherubim and the seraphim, and to come all the way back down to where I'm standing again, one of the spiritual hierarchies talked about is that from where I'm standing on what I call Earth to the moon would be the spiritual realm of what we call angels, followed on by archangels, followed on by archi out to the powers of the sun. So I know I just said a lot of words there, but the reason I did it is to show you that when I want to try to get to something that's more acceptable than what I'm being told here in the century that we're in, I go as far backwards as I can, because I call it like before the modern edit. The problem is, as we all know, is many of these very old documents went through the Vatican or the Jesuits or some other controlling organization that did the translation.
We just did a release on the Renaissance book hunters and the potential forgery that went down with those humanists. And I'm a big believer in the Renaissance. It happened. It was criminal in many instances. And I do think there is enough evidence to suggest they were forging texts. Sure. And it's during that time period where that heliocentric model and our conception of space that we know today, we've inherited from that era. Why do you think, if you believe the Renaissance happened like it did, why do you think it was then that they started to fashion this lie?
We are reaping the whirlwind of the foundations being set by that time. By the way, I don't accept that our chronology is correct, but I agree with you. The Renaissance did happen. We just probably don't call it the right year. It's a little bit like the Matrix.
You believe it's the year 1999, when in fact it's closer to 2199.
Did you know that right now in Ethiopia, I think the year is 2015? Don't quote me on it, but it's something like that. You begin to realize the problem with chronology. And chronology has been one of the biggest controls in our world, calendars and other things, but that's not the question. To get back to the Renaissance, I count the Renaissance as a turning point towards hypermaterialism. I call it the foundations of the flip to hypermaterialism. All of a sudden, there's guys out there copying art from some unknown time in the past. Their own lips are saying, we can't come close to these people we're copying. And yet we're looking at the work they did in the Renaissance as, oh my God, we couldn't do that now, or whatever. We're holding it up to a high level of ability. But the truth is that they were mostly copying. A lot of it was copies. And what they were copying had a solid meaning. Like if you took the idea of the three fates, there was a time in history when you saw the three fates in a painting or a sculpture, you had a basic idea of the lesson that art was conveying to you. What happened in the Renaissance was that message got lost. And now we're going to have rock stars. Oh, this dude, Michelangelo, he's a rock star. It's a flip to hypermaterialism, but there's more to this tale. When I was talking to you about the older ideas of spiritual hierarchies, the way I confirmed it was to start with, is this place I'm standing alive? For me, it is. So when I look up at the rest of the creation, which is everything I can see, if I'm standing on a place that's alive, or all these things that I can see alive, and I accept that they are. So when we get to the idea of spiritual hierarchies, that becomes more acceptable to a modern mind that might be jaded against such things. But I also accept that we once had spiritual vision. When these ideas were put forward that this is the realm of what we call angels or archangels, maybe over in India they might use a word like diva, or who knows. Every culture has their versions. They differ slightly, but the ideas are very similar. It is claimed that they weren't guessing, that they had a thing called spiritual vision. Maybe someone's going to start thinking about the pineal gland, the third eye, but it's going to get called spiritual vision for right now. The spiritual vision was lost, as far as I can tell, somewhere between what we call 1400 or 1600s, right around the Renaissance, whatever the years actually might have been. And if that is true, then you see that probably places like the Vatican, which are basically just the Roman Empire rebranded, if you want to be honest about it. The Senate doors from ancient Rome are on the first Basilica St. John's. That's how close this, it's the same place, just rebranded. They had information that goes back a long, long ways. If part of that information is what happens at an age change or an era shift, then I think it adds much to what people can consider about what's going on right now.
You do get that sense from reading the history that there was a very significant shift after the Black Death. And this idea of higher degrees of consciousness, does that relate to activity with the sun itself, do you think?
Yes. If I knew more, I'd be able to answer that intelligently. What I can do now is speculate on a lifetime of research and a lot of time behind, a telescope. When I first started doing podcasts, it became blatantly clear to me that if I said the word astronomy, all the astrologers left the room. If I said the word astrology, all the astronomers left the room. And I recognized the problem. We need to get these minds together, and we need to start melding these two things together for a higher benefit. And so I invented a word that I was going to try to use where I wouldn't lose half of the participants. The word was sky clock, and it worked pretty well. I see it used by science-based minds now occasionally, and I see it used by astrology-based minds. The way that I view the sun, it's almost like a lens. In the same way, let me try it this way. They're originally, like, if you go back to astrological ideas, which drove everything, not too long ago, or if you want to go back to the empires, when you're looking at a temple of Jupiter and a temple of Mars, what are you looking at there? It's basically what we would call astrology, except there's no difference between astronomy and astrology. It's all the same thing. That was true in Tycho Brahe's time, who, by the way, was drawing astrological charts as he did the hard science and observation for kings and other people. And they were highly sought after because of their veracity. if we look at the idea that there were 7 luminaries, so you know what they are, it's everything pretty much except Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, right? Those weren't apparently in the picture yet. That broke down into a way of thinking about the energies of this world. It correlated with what we call planets, the sun, the moon. Everybody knows how it goes. But if you see a rainbow, that's an act of nature. There's no lie in it. If I can learn something from nature, then I've learned the truth. That rainbow is typically broken down into 7 colors. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because it's a good way to show that at one point, the white light we see, or what we call white light, could be put through a prism, broken into these other colors. Each one's an energy. What we know now, and what they probably knew then, is that's a vibrational rate. That's a cymatics trace. But if we blow it back out to the sun, this is where I think what I'm about to say is important. The sun seems to be a bit like a lens. So all the energies that affect our life from the sky clock, which I don't accept as arguable, by the way, and I'll tell you why in a second. It's lensing in all the energies. That's kind of how I view the sun. And it has its influences, as do the moon. And those are the 2 basic close luminaries for our system, though I view all the luminaries as part of our system. To get back to people who want to argue if the sky clock has any influence over them, I'll ask a simple question. Have you ever lived for a year and experienced the difference between summer and winter? What's doing it? Sky clock's doing it. Have you ever seen the horseshoe crabs come ashore? What's doing it? Sky clock's doing it. Have you ever seen one of the largest organisms claimed by science, the Great Barrier Reef, spawn? Every year, I think it might be November, I've forgotten. This whole massive life spawns. What's doing it? Sky clock's doing it. You look at every ancient culture and we say these kind of very shallow-minded, well, this is, all these buildings are aligned to the equinoxes and the solstices, but, you know, those crazy old people, what did they know? There's a reason, because these are the energies of this world. And the people who understand these energies, and I assure you, the people pulling the strings understand these energies. And we've been talked out of what we can learn, the truth we can learn from nature. The older cultures, which is why I always go back to try to learn what I want to learn, never lost sight of that. Why? Because they had to grow things. And they knew, if I'm not ready when winter's coming, I could die out here, you know? And they also knew, when all these things I grew are used up, I got to go out and kill things to stay alive now. These cycles, they were part of it. And we have been so far removed from these cycles that we have been funneled down from what I'll just use as an example of, so let's say I call a full spectrum view of this place based on the colors in a rainbow and based on the amount of luminaries that used to run these old systems to single spectrum. We have the sun now. At some point, it became illegal to have a temple to Mars. At some point, the Vatican shifted everyone out of Mithraism, which was sun-based, and they changed the rules and made it illegal to look at any of these other pagan energies. They called it pagan, which simply means living close to nature, which was the insult that they used to shame people along the way to help them get their way. But these energies are undeniable. And when you see all these things happen in the world, if you have some semblance of knowing about what we call astrology, which shouldn't be pigeonholed like that, then you'll have a lot of people showing you why. And this spring that we're going into right now, we're recording this on the 18th of February. I am exactly less one day by a month to my spring equinox. On the 17th of next month, and it is the 18th right now, the equinox will occur. And you will see things happen in this world, and they will be leveraging off energies, among other things. And this is where we've got to get back to. We've got to get away from these Fugazi parallel system. Look, if you want to kind of comprehend what's gone on here, whoever This is shown in trusts, okay? Everybody knows how a trust works. There's the guy who creates the thing. There's a trustee and a beneficiary. No one should ever want to be the trustee. No upside to being the trustee. But it's also been taken from an older idea, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, which is still an older idea, which is supported by sacred geometry. I want to make something, I made a dot. Well, I can't make anything. I made another dot. Now I got a line. Well, I can't make anything. Oh, that third dot, now I've got geometry. I can start making things. It goes all the way back to nature to prove its veracity. But what's gone on here is the people that run this show can't be gods of this place. Why? Well, for one, they didn't make it, so they have no claim. And for two, they can't make a fish from scratch, can't make an oak tree from scratch, can't make ecosystems and all these other things from scratch. So they've created a parallel technological world. In fact, they did create. And of that parallel synthetic creation, they will claim overlordship, which is what's going on in our lives right now. It will probably come to a point where you choose, screw you and your nice air conditioner, because I'm not willing to sign my soul away for your air conditioner or your car or all the other synthetic things that I couldn't possibly make, that they can make or they have control over making. And that's a big part of what's about to happen and how people are going to get trapped. And once you are trapped, you're going to be the trustee. And the last thing you ever want to be is the trustee. We were granted some things here and we've all forgot it because corporations control religions. In my view, religion is spirituality gone wrong at this point. Go look at whatever religion you're defending and then find out it's a 5013C. That's a corporation. That is a dead body that has been given the rights of a living person. Even in the word corpse, corpse oration, the speaking dead. It's all there for anyone who wants to common sense think it through. But there's another piece of this. Up to about 4 or 5 years ago, we were being told, guess what? We've cleared 7 billion people. No, we didn't. No, we did not. What happened is people went to cities and cities look very, very crowded. You get on a plane in New York and fly to California, 90% of your trip will be over, or nobody around, open fields, open land. But people still won't believe me. But I did a show 4 or 5 years ago that says the birth rate has been dropping since 75. They started publishing that, guess what? Since 1974, the developed world population has been falling. I said that if the birth rate falls below 2.5, which is one mother had 2.5 babies, don't ask me how a mom has half a baby, it's clever math, then that's never been recovered from in history. They're openly telling you this is true, except they're not using 2.5, they're using 2. In other words, the average number of mothers has to have 2 babies to support what's going on in the world. Well, we're in trouble. We have way more old people, and it's going to get worse, and not enough young people to support them. This place is becoming empty. There are fewer people. Why can't they find people to work at jobs? Why are there so many empty houses in my neighborhood? And to know a simple thing, like when an age change happens, which has been so obfuscated. The hippies were singing songs we're in the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Guess what? Misdirection. I don't think anyone knows exactly for sure in the public realm when that is, and some people might, but there are older traditions like the Hindu Yuga cycles, which were around a long time. If they knew that we were coming out of the so-called dark eras or the bottom of the wheel that we have been descending, and we can easily look and see how far we've fallen since the 1800s. An educated person in the 1800s dressed nice every day, probably spoke 3, 4, maybe even 5 languages. Look at their penmanship. Look at the higher-minded language they're writing and the letters we can look up today. As I speak, children are no longer taught how to cursive write in most of the schools in the country that I live. Part of that is just because they'll never be able to read the Declaration of Independence or anything like that. easy to change what it means. The other part of it is AI does not deal well with handwriting. To come back around to the point, they know where we are. They know where the energies and the likelihoods exist. Then they cast their dark spells, and they've been doing a pretty bang-up job since at least the 60s. And it didn't help that we made bad decisions. Everything is an offer in this world, and we have been accepting some offers we should have never considered. But never forget that you were granted the divine spark of life. I don't care how you want to think of how that happened. It's true. You are alive. You were granted free will. That is massive. With free will comes creative powers. Lastly, and this is what people forget, you were granted as beneficiary of this creation. Now you see what the game is about. They want that beneficiaryship. They want you to be a trustee in their fugazi, constraining, non-freedom exerting system that they are making parallel to the natural world.
And it's interesting that you mentioned the AI not doing very well with handwriting. I wonder whether it's a good time to talk about AI, because we're seeing that explode at the minute. It seems like that's being fast-tracked through, and it's, you know, it's becoming accessible as well to the majority in ways that personally I feel could be quite dangerous. It could definitely be dangerous in terms of our historical record of what we do have.
Everything that's about to happen depends on decisions. Each of us can make our individual decision, but as we all know, the majority of the so-called masses is going to have an effect on us all. The more people that go the wrong way are going to make it harder on the people trying to go the right way and maintain their divine spark and their freedom and their beneficiaryship in this creation. Do you guys remember a thing called Napster?
Oh, yeah.
Man big in a jungle. You never know you can watch it. Big in a jungle. We will tell everybody, watch it now, man. Me a the nutter, original man, nutter, original man. You can't feel my anger. You can't feel my pain. You can't feel my torment. Driving me insane. I can't fight these feelings. They will.
So Napster is a good example of what just happened out in the open. I don't know, at the end of 22, actually I think it started in 21, when they free-ranged AI and made it available to people. What Napster did to the world is going to be multiplied by a few 100,000 times. If AI is allowed to do what it's doing, it's going to make the internet more banal than it already is, because all people want to do is create content, and they're not interested in the veracity of the content. They're interested in how many likes they get. They're interested in how many views. And the reason for that is because the purveyors of these platforms make that the benchmark for success. The value of information on the internet will plummet because of AI, because now everyone's an artist, everyone's a musician, everyone's an author, everyone's everything they ever wanted to be, based on a tool that was made that stole its ability to do what it's doing from the published history of human beings online. For a piece of software, they will argue, to give me a Rodin style art piece in the style of Starry, Starry Night is not copyright infringement. But the truth of it is that it scraped not just someone's art, but the actual essence of what made their art interesting. That's all been taken now. But what's worse is all the people out there making content, they can in 3 minutes make the best image imaginable, best video imaginable. They can write its own music, can probably even make a top 5 hit music. It can write a book. It can do any of this. If the AI is allowed to go, then it will be a tectonic shift that is multiplied by hundreds of thousands of times how Napster changed industry, music, and all the things that it changed. It can't even be quantified. And it's a sad state of affairs, because for those who have come to realize that there is no lie in nature and that it is alive, as I am, AI has no life. And it shouldn't be called intelligence. It's an algorithm. It's code. The basic breakdown for what it means to be a part of this creation was well shown in the old alchemical ideas. Everything can be broken down into the triad I was talking about earlier. You have a soul, a spirit, a body. Doesn't matter if you're a rock, a leaf, a human being, a grasshopper, you can be broken down physically in a laboratory to show that these elements can be derived. AI cannot be broken down in that way. AI is going to be the Overton window, but we are still at a stage where we can decide, and I would point out any significant technology like the internet is 50 years behind what was already worked out. Almost any technology that is true of.
This notion as well of secret technology. And the way I kind of conceptualize where we are, like the way I kind of get around it in my head is I look back because, you know, I've done a lot of work now looking into the end of the Middle Ages and whatnot. And it does seem to me that they were on the brink of the Industrial Revolution.
The other synthetic parallel system, which people bought into, that helped them forget what nature provides for us. I would point out the Industrial Revolution is the mechanical version of what we're about to do with digital tech.
Exactly. I completely agree. And what I see with something that they call the Black Death, whatever that was, you know, the Industrial Revolution was on track to happen a lot earlier, but then that swept in with a whole, you know, host of other factors and prevented it. And it got delayed until the 1800s. So we're told. That's what's in the record. And the way I sort of conceptualize now is, and, you know, I believe in God. So I think that this is coming from a higher power, but we're being tested because there is an argument to be made when it comes to AI and all this other technology that if responsible enough, it could be used in a way that benefits. I'm not saying that's particularly my view, but there is an argument for that. And I kind of see it as we're being tested. And the way it's going, it looks like there at some point there could be we could end up in a similar situation, like the end of the Middle Ages, with a big reset, for want of a better word, because this technology is available to us now. And what we seem to have done is not deal with it in a responsible way, but just go, you know, full on into it, ignoring the dangers. And I just can't see how any civilization can continue with technology like that without destroying itself.
Everything is a test. Every day, every breath, everything is a test. This world appears to be a bit like a boot camp. The things that happen here are going to come hard and fast. And if there is not some growth that takes us further on, then what would be the point of any of this? But this brings me back to what you started with, free will. Imagine a bigger idea than free will. Will you hear people scream and gnash their teeth about any other thing more than the loss of free will? But in truth, free will is the biggest test of all. We've been granted the divine spark. We have life. It's undeniable. We've been granted free will. It's also undeniable. All the systems that we have entered into right now are mostly designed to deal with that, so that we don't have free will. Everything is an offer. Once you accept that offer, you're considered contractually bound, but the norms of society pretty much bind it to you anyhow. Lastly, we are beneficiaries of this creation, but let's go back to free will. I have noticed that free will cause more trouble than any other thing that occurs here, both from the people in charge and both for the people themselves. Like, think of drug addiction. That's a free will thing. Or alcoholism or murder. These all have to do with free will. But what I have noticed, and this is a weird thing, it's almost like we get free will temporarily while we're learning here. There are claims that higher forms of consciousness, like so-called angels, don't have it. People will argue about that, but I've read what I've read from older schools of thought and secret places that didn't give it out for free. that higher forms of thought don't have the free will we do. It's even been used in stories to say, well, the higher beings were mad because why did these lesser humans get it? Well, that doesn't work either, because if the higher being didn't have free will, then it couldn't get it couldn't get mad. That would not be an option to become upset and to judge on its own. But we have it. And in that, I have noticed that the most spiritually advanced beings, while they employ their free will, it's almost like we begin to realize how this world works, learning exclusively from nature. If nature says a thing works this way and we figure it out, we can't do any better. But it seems to be that the people who are more spiritually adept are not exercising free will at the same level we are, that are not that spiritually adept. It seems to be a key component in the testing of us. In other words, here you go. You go to your door, you can turn left or right. Nobody can deny you've got free will. What are you going to do with it? And in that, isn't that the assumption that we can make, that every possible outcome is going to happen? Sometimes it's a scary thought, like right now. Like, so many people think, oh, well, someone's coming to save us and bail us out of this. Is that right? It was our decisions, all of us, who put us here. And you can blame it on the people in charge, but we allowed it. We outnumber them hundreds of thousands to one, probably. We did not have to allow this. We could have said no. As a matter of fact, we're starting to see many more people say no, and they rolled out some of the things they've done recently, like Covidius minimus. It doesn't seem to be as feasible because they rolled it out so quickly. Nonetheless, it was all an offer. An offer was made, and we had the free will to take the offer or not take the offer. And in that, I think there is a hell of a lesson to be learned, because along with forgetting that we are beneficiaries of this created, granted by God, ain't no higher court, ain't no committee of 300 can trump that gift, that grant. But we forgot it. So then our free will allows it to be so.
Well, Crow, we rebranded our name to Conspiracy Graduates, but listening to you definitely still feel like students for sure. You had us on as guests a little while back, and I'm curious, how was the reception from your crowd to our episode?
It was mostly positive, and then there were some snipers that had a bone to pick. And if I remember correctly, it had a lot to do with ego and free will. If you want to be honest about it, they had married an idea, things like the mud flood, things like other ideas like that they were very invested in, and so they sniped because someone else had said something different or rethought their position. But this too is a key lesson. I don't know everything. You don't know everything. And if you are to a point where, because of what you think you know, prevents the ideas around you, then you are no better than the controllers of this world trying to remove the free will of another. What I saw was, if you don't believe in this theory that we've come up with, then to hell with you. You shouldn't even be allowed to talk on this platform. How are you any different? We need every idea on the table right now.
And I can certainly say that I am guilty of playing into division, whether it be online at times, behind the wheel of a car with the windows rolled up, driving through New Jersey and saying some of the worst things I've ever said to another human being.
What, are you fucking retarded? You're fucking retarded! You're a retarded person, and you're driving a fucking car!
But yeah, it has all been a learning lesson for me, still learning, even going back to how you were talking about the AI just replacing the artist. I myself am guilty of using Midjourney, one of these programs. You just type in what you want, gives you the images, and we have used them for visual storytelling purposes. And there is something really weird when you use it. I can say that.
You mean a bad feeling?
It's eerie. And how I was introduced to it was watching videos on YouTube of people like making a video about what would Batman look like in the dark ages as an 80s movie. Yeah, that's how I saw it. And I was like, it almost felt like it was real. Like in some alternative universe, this movie does exist, but it's not. And then once I started using it and seeing what it could do, there's definitely a gut feeling of just eeriness sometimes using it. But then you see it in the videos and watching it, and it's like, okay, yeah, you know, this is like really, really useful for an artist who's on a budget.
You know, I hear you talking about what I call the small, still voice. A big part of my spiritual journey in this realm has been learning to hear the small, still voice. I work at it every day. How many times in my life has the small, still voice tried to tell me and I didn't even recognize it, or I heard it and ignored it? That's why I asked you, did you get a bad feeling? That small, still voice tells you the truth. That's your intuition. You know, if we were playing Pinocchio here, that'd be Jiminy Cricket trying to tell you. And crypto and AI are two things that people regularly get upset with me. Crypto is going to do more damage to our world and has the potential to take more freedom than we've ever lost. And I'm not guessing. Who made gold and silver? Once you know the answer to that question, then you know why it has value. AI, you know who made it, you know how it's here. Crypto, you know who made it, you know how it's here. And crypto that you think you know about right now is just a dry run. Because once the big boys get their crypto, they will tolerate no contenders. None. None. They never do. Well, what's the Lord of the Rings? Sauron doesn't share power.
There is only one Lord of the Ring. Only one who can bend it to his will. And he does not share power.
When they get their digital crypto, it will be programmable. You will never again make another transaction that isn't on the ledgers and known. Never again will you go to Vegas and lose $1,000 and nobody will know about it but you. You will be programmed using a programmable currency that can do things like, say, you get to spend 10 units of measure, 10 fake bucks today. You'll be using a currency that says, sorry, you can't have any money today. You failed to renew your driver's license. That is the world and the promise of crypto brought to you by a corporation who has no concern for the concerns of a living man who is granted the divine spark and has been made beneficiary of this realm with free will, because out of the gate, it wants two of those things removed. Wants the free will gone. And beneficiary my butt. We've got to get back to a measure that is sane. That measure for me is that there is no lie in nature. And for me, I know how I suspect the creation came to be in the same way I came to be. That's a personal choice. But within that, there is no lie. Everything about crypto is a lie. Everything about AI is a lie. Technically, it doesn't even exist. It's electrons balanced on the head of a pin somewhere. Did you ever see the old 1970s movie Rollerball?
The books you've ordered are classified and have been transcribed and summarized.
Well, who summarized it?
Zero, of course. He's the world's brain.
Does it answer you?
Well, it speaks.
I'd like some information about corporate decisions, how they're made and who makes them.
Rollerball tells you how it is, and the first rule you should learn from Rollerball is you can't succeed on a playing field where the rules are not known or where the rules are changed regularly. That's social media. Did you know that on many of the social media platforms, there is a 50% chance that the comment you're reading was started by a bot? You've got to get back to a playing field where it's level, where you know the rules, where the rules are not changing every 5 seconds, and you've got to decentralize. If you join a group, you're going to create a target. And if that group ever gets close to anything of value or meaning, it's just going to be pulled apart. Look how much trouble the Flat Earth movement, a legitimate movement. Everyone has the right to question where we exist. They're not hurting anybody. And yet look at the trouble that's been leveled at them because of the formation of an easily conglomerated target.
Well, I can already see the comments because a lot of people think Ewar is just a bot. So I'm sure they'll be chiming in trying to claim that you actually talked to one here.
But unfortunately, I will never see those comments.
Thanks for coming on. It's great talking to you. And I really enjoyed going on your show. You know, we had a really good time.